We have all seen the alarming videos, graphic photographs, and heard the disturbing newscasts. But what you haven't seen or heard is the stories of the MBW Army Engineer Company that was at the Pentagon on that horrible day of September 11th. This will take you through a man's life who until now has not spoken about September 11th and the journey it takes him on.
Coverage will get closer to home. We have some indication of fire and smoke at the Pentagon right now. WTOP's Neil Augenstein. All right, we've just had some kind of line interruption there, but we're going to get that back up. Have we got that worked out? All right, the report we have is of fire and smoke at the Pentagon. We should tell you that we have gotten calls from people who live and work around the Pentagon who have told us that they have seen something that they have described as an explosion. This is information we have not been able to confirm. And we are trying right now to get Neil Augenstein, who has some line of view of this situation. And we are working through a problematic telephone problem for you right now that we will resolve this. Obviously, we are watching closely to see what kind of response we might have here in the Washington area. Could there have been any more blatant act of terrorism against the United States than attacking both World Trade Center towers in New York City? Yes, maybe. Attacking the Pentagon, if that, in fact, is what happened. We're looking at some pictures of the Pentagon right now. We do see some smoke in that area. We do not know the origin of it, what may have caused it. We do know that it is thick smoke, that it is billowing above the Pentagon right now here in Washington, just outside of Washington, D.C. Have we been able to get Neil Augenstein worked out? He's got a line of view of this, and we're trying to get his live eye report for us.
The latest word we're getting on this situation, which is now creeping into Washington, is that a crash of an airplane, perhaps into the Pentagon, some type of explosion there, and also an immediate evacuation of the White House has been ordered.
On September the 11th, I had learned of what was going on from listening to the radio. I'd been out of the Army for about 5 days. Had started with a company as a delivery truck driver, delivering construction rental equipment. And we were sitting on Quaker Lane, right off of 395, and we physically saw the plane come down. We heard how the jets make the sound when they're decelerating, when they're coming down. They make that whining noise when they start to throttle back. And we looked up and we saw the plane going up, and we knew exactly where he was going because it's the closest thing around. And then we felt the impact. We felt the concussion from the impact when the plane exploded. And I told Dan, I was like, I gotta go back to my unit. I went inside, called the operations sergeant and told him, what I saw, and we went back to leave. Was the first day that Fort Belvoir became a closed post, where you had to have military ID to come in. And we came in the back gate off of John J. Kingman, and I was in the passenger seat of the tractor trailer, and I climbed over his seat, and I was like, I'm Sergeant Snavely, I'm reporting back for duty. And I was like, I'm going to MBW Engineer Company. And he's like, they're expecting you. He's like, get your ass in there. So, and I reported back.
My name is Kyle Wurgler, and I am 16 years old.
All right, my name is John Ryder, currently a major in the United States Army. Work for an organization called Program Executive Office Soldier at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, as an assistant product manager for flame-resistant clothing. At the time of September 11th, I was a first lieutenant with MBW Engineer Company, assigned as the heavy rescue platoon leader, and in charge mainly for the night shift during September 11th.
My name's Dewey Snavely. I'm actually an equipment safety manager for a government contractor called MC Dean now. On September the 11th, I was on terminal leave. I'd been on terminal leave for about 5 days. I had been part of the unit for about 3.5 years, going on 4 years when I got out. And I was a rescue squad leader / team leader on September the 11th for Military District Washington Engineer Company.
Hello, my name is Michael Stewart. I currently work here at the Pentagon for the Pentagon Force Protection Agency Safety Office. I'm one of the primary instructors here to teach in the Pentagon Police Department in regards to radiation safety, Bernie level C response, and then emergency actions in the event of a terrorist attack. My title at the time on 9/11 when I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, MDW Rescue Engineers, I was an E5 sergeant. I was part of a little squad. I was one of the EMTs for the extractors.
Felix Monet. I'm a heavy equipment operator at Arlington National Cemetery. It was also I was on a heavy rescue platoon at the NDW Engineers at the time.
Well, on that morning, it was a different morning for most of us as in that company, on the MDW Engineer Company, because it was for the first time that they were actually going to be on that base, from what I can remember, where they were going to have gate guard. Me and one of my buddies from that unit, his name's Sergeant Champagne, we both had to report to the gate guard at 4:45 in the morning. And on that morning, we were out at the gate guard, and all of a sudden, later on that morning, some people started coming through the gate crying. And we're like, what's going on? We just didn't understand. What is going on? And another person came through and said they just hit the Twin Towers. And we're like, what hit the Twin Towers? We still didn't have any idea. Next thing you know, another person came through a little later, said they just hit the Pentagon. And our job at the MDW Engineer Company is the District of Washington area, so the Pentagon falls within that realm. And standard issue for all of us is that we were all given a pager. And when there was an emergency, 911 would come across on that pager, and that may immediately report back to the company headquarters, because there's a high possibility that we're getting ready to go somewhere and do the job that we've been trained to do. First thing that happened is we were all called back for accountability. We needed to make sure all of us were accounted for and that everyone knew what was going on and what the possibility of us possibly leaving to go to the Pentagon to do our job. Me personally, I had to run home and tell my wife briefly that they had just hit the Pentagon, they just hit the Twin Towers, turn on the TV, I gotta go, I love you, I don't know when I'm gonna be back. And I had to run back out the door at that moment and run back to the company. Well, what we did is once we finally got approval from our higher command, we left the base there on Northern Virginia at Fort Belvoir, and we went up Prince William Parkway, I believe is the name of the road. What was kind of special about that drive that I specifically remember as we were heading to Pentagon, there was large in groups of people coming outside, and what they were doing is they were out there pretty much cheering us on, telling us, go get them, USA, chance of USA was being heard. Well, one of the first things I saw was, it just looked like the whole side of the building was, pretty damaged. And there was a lot of smoke, a lot of chaos. One of the first feelings I had when I got on scene was just the sheer magnitude of what had happened there. You take a step back and you have to absorb the moment. So much had happened in such a short amount of time. We get there and all of a sudden it's real at that point. It's right there in front of you. As people were watching it on TV, me and that group of guys and all the other rescuers on scene that were actually seeing it live. It really took a moment for that to all absorb. It also was kind of an unsettled feeling because as far as we knew, there could be more planes in the air. There could have been, more planes inbound. We had no idea. So as we're trying to perform our job there at the Pentagon, we also had this unsettled feeling whether or not there were still planes in the air, because we didn't have a whole lot of communication as far as that goes. We just knew we had a job to do. Well, my first shift was really, I guess you could say, it was almost 24 hours. We were running 24-hour shifts to start because we didn't really know at that point, you know, we have to get in there and see if there's anybody in there that needs our assistance. So, team on my squad. But we were so trained for something like this to happen. We were always preparing, always prepping, you know, do what we had always been trained to do, and that's do the search and rescue. Once they determined no one had survived, they had us do what I consider probably the most difficult part of our job while I was there anyway, in my eyes. They had us put on this Nomex suits for sanitation reasons over top of our rescue suits that we had already worn. These big rubber boots on. They had us down on our hands and knees. We were sifting through a lot of different rubble, rocks, dirt, and what we were actually looking for were people's fingers, believe it or not. We were looking for skin. We were looking for people's wallets, any kind of type of identification. Once we have identified any of those items, we had to notify the FBI so that they could come over and bag that and categorize it however they do their jobs, and then continue to move on searching through that stuff. Well, to be honest with you, I don't know that I truly ever slept. You know, there was times where we had breaks. Eventually they broke our shifts down, so maybe we were only at work 8 hours instead of the 24 hours, because so many rescue teams had showed up on site that it didn't have the demand that they had when we first got there. But even when you were off shift and you were off site trying to get some sleep, it's not that you really slept. You really talked amongst the other guys, you know, what your experiences were while you were inside the Pentagon, what you were seeing, what your thoughts were on what was taking place, what had taken place. So, I mean, it was never really truly sleep. I think most of us were running just pure off adrenaline. All I knew as far as what had taken place in New York is from what the people that came through that gate that early morning crying and saying that, you know, eventually we did hear from, you know, the people that planes that hit the Twin Towers. I had no idea what had taken place in Pennsylvania, probably until, I don't know, 10 days or so later, maybe 8 to 10 days. There just wasn't a lot of TVs for us to watch. We were, you know, always on the go, so I didn't find out about that until later. Since September 11 actually took place, you know, people have ways of coping with things. And my way of coping with things was really to clam up. I didn't talk a lot about it. I would talk to a pastor or a chaplain, which is a military priest, about those events that occurred. I did once when I was at a school for the Army. During the middle of class, I got up and said I needed to go talk to somebody because I was at an Army school during one of the anniversaries. It's just a way of me venting out some of my emotion to somebody else that is a neutral party so that they can hear me out and pray with me. I truly will never forget, and as the country probably as close-knit as they were at the time that all that happened, as my point of view, I don't believe so. I just think that the country needs to bind back together as we did during those tough moments in our country's history, and, you know, and truly move forward. I understand that some of these programs that I was just talking about are playing behind me as I'm talking now. It makes me feel, to be honest with you, a little uncomfortable just because I know that there's probably people on there talking about the same things that I went through, about what my buddies went through, about the people in New York went through, about the people in Pennsylvania went through. And I can reassure you that probably I will probably turn it off when we're done, because I won't be able to watch it even to this day, 11 years later. Some of the things that have reminded me of what happened on September 11th that kind of rushed those memories back. One of those occurrences, just maybe a year and a half later, after the events unfolded on September 11th, one of my soldiers' apartments on base had caught fire. And when I had to physically go over there and to inspect the quarters to kind of see, you know, what had happened. The problem is when I went in there, the smell of that char from it having caught fire instantly reminded me of the smell from when I was at the Pentagon, and I couldn't stay in the building any longer. I had to get out because everything just started coming back, and it came back real fast. So I had to immediately get out of there, and someone else had to go in there. I couldn't take it anymore. Another occurrence that has kind of bothered me, where I lived in Ohio, there was an airport that's not far away, and these planes would constantly fly over the house. Granted, they're up pretty high, but you could hear their engines winding down. And every time I hear that, all the hairs on my arms would stand up. It leaves, once again, that unsettled feeling that I so much try to avoid. One last occurrence that kind of stands out to me, there was some kids that were playing in my backyard. They were back I had a wood line right behind my house, and they were back there playing with fire, you know, being some dumb kids. And what they ended up doing is catching the trees on fire. And the fire department had to rush out there. We weren't even home. We come home and we go back there, and once again, that smell of that burnt char smell, I don't even know how to explain it, but it just, once again, just like a fire, it ignited all my emotions and my feelings again, and I couldn't even be back there.
My name is Julie Wurgler, and on September 11th, 2001, my husband came rushing through the door and ran toward the closet to grab his emergency equipment gear. I immediately seen the fear in his eyes. I immediately knew something was terribly wrong. He told me that there had been an attack on the Pentagon. He told me to turn on the news, gave me a kiss, and told me that he didn't know when he'd see me next. He rushed out the door, and I immediately turned on the TV and seen what was going on in New York. In that moment, I knew that he was right. I had no idea when I would see my husband again. The whole day I was frantic, worried about my husband and worried about his fellow rescue workers. I immediately started packing my bags and loading my car. But the base had been shut down, and all the major highways had been closed. So I was stuck on base. I got word that my son's school had been put on lockdown. So I headed to his school, walking down the sidewalk, and I seen a plane flying over, very low. And I stopped immediately in my path with chills running up my back and goosebumps, knowing that all planes at that time were supposed to be landed. I have no idea how long I had stood there. After a while, I turned and I looked to my right and left and behind me. And I realized that there were other mothers also walking down the sidewalks to get their children, but were stunned in their path as well, just watching the airplane in the sky, wondering where it was headed. We were all standing there, struck in our own fear. I rushed to the school to get my son and brought him home. I had satisfaction knowing that I at least had one loved one with me. I hugged him and I kissed him. And we sat there and we prayed for his dad. But I needed to know at least one person in my family was safe and in my care. I was trying to get off base as soon as I could, but the lockdown continued. I went to bed that night. I couldn't sleep. I worried. I worried for my husband and where he was and what he was doing. I continued to talk to God, praying that in the midst of the night, that the terrorists wouldn't take advantage of the vulnerability of our sleep and attack again. Every night on post, as they lower the flag, they play the taps. That night, the taps had a whole new meaning. For all those who had lost their lives that day, for all those who were risking their lives that day, I laid there and bawled my eyes out as I heard the taps play. I begged God and to bring my husband home safe. Even to this day, it is hard to hear the taps play. It takes me right back to that night, laying in bed, worrying about the safety of our country, of the rescue workers. I had to get off base. It was causing me too much stress because I was at the beginning of my pregnancy and I was high risk for the first trimester. Even though base was still locked down, the major highways had been opened. I knew a way to get off base, but my car had broken down. I couldn't get it to start. Thankfully, my family was gracious enough to drive to Virginia to come and pick me up and take me back to my hometown in Ohio. I was able to be there in the support of my family. After a couple days of being there, my husband called me on a secure line. It was such a relief to hear his voice. He couldn't say much, but he could tell me that he was okay. And that's all I needed to hear. After watching on the news with the Pentagon being on fire and the partial of the building collapsing, not knowing where my husband was in those moments, I needed to hear that he was okay. My family drove me back to Virginia. And the next day, one of the wives drove me to Fort Myers so I could see my husband when he was on his downtime. I could see how tired and worn and fatigued he was. The look in his eyes. You could tell that he was physically and mentally exhausted from what he had experienced. It was good to see him though, knowing that he was physically okay. 2 weeks after the attack, he returned home. He slept a lot the first couple days. He didn't have much to say. He was very quiet. He didn't talk to any of us much. I didn't know what he had gone through. I didn't know what he had experienced. But all I knew was whatever he did there and seen would affect him for the rest of his life.
Well, here we are up in my attic. One of the items that I was talking about, we have some name tags that I used that were on my uniform identifying me from, obviously from somebody else, if you didn't know my name. They just say Sergeant Wurgler, U.S. Army. These were velcroed onto our shirts so that people could identify us. Another thing here you'll see, American flag. It's like a bandana. But what I had done with this is folded it all up, and I wore this inside lining of my rescue helmet. I don't have the rescue helmet with me today, but this is something that I wore on the inside of that helmet the whole time I was at the Pentagon. And a lot of other soldiers did the same thing. Here are my two pieces of the Pentagon. They're relatively small, but just because they're small in stature doesn't mean they don't have huge meaning to me. They still have a smell on them, even after 11 years, they still have a charged smell on them today that if I put up close enough to my nose, I can still smell and recognize. I found out today that my children, this is the first time that they've actually even seen these pieces of the Pentagon, which kind of struck me, and I had to take a step back because I didn't realize up until this point that I had neglected these items for so long that I hadn't even taken the time to show my own children. So it was nice to be able to show them and express to them what these had and what meaning these pieces had to me, and it will to them as well. Here's a couple magazines that we were in during the time when we were at the Pentagon. Here's some of the identification tags that we wore. You know, just once again identifying who we were, what company we were with, what rescue team we were with, what our blood type was if that information was needed, and what our social security number was, so that people could properly identify us. And additionally, we had another badge, I guess you could say, to get into the restricted area. But like I stated earlier, that was put onto a plaque and presented to us as an award for our time served. And last but not least, this is the American flag that we wore on our uniforms, on our rescue uniforms. Flag identifying who we were with and how proud we were to wear this.
September 11th, I was 5 years old and in kindergarten. I was in class at the time of the September 11th attacks. I don't remember in very clear detail, but a lot of panic from the teachers. What I do remember is teachers running up and down the hallways, yelling what they heard and what they thought was happening. And there was so much fear because we lived so close to the Pentagon at the time. We were put on lockdown after we were aware of what was going on. Well, the teachers and adults were aware of what was going on. Some of the scariest moments there were people crying everywhere and military personnel outside the schools with their guns ready to do whatever they're going to do. I was 5. Wasn't too sure what was going on. It's scary stuff. We left the base. We had to sneak off because we were not allowed to leave through the main gates, and we had to go to a side gate and go underneath the gate, run to the side gate, sneak underneath the gate where my grandparents were waiting the van to pick us up with our luggage. Well, and after they had picked us up, they took us to our hometown, Louisville, Ohio. And I guess I felt safer there because it's someplace I know better, where I'm comfortable. It's where I grew up at. And I had friends there, we had family. And I guess I just felt much safer there than someplace we hadn't lived for very long and I was unfamiliar with. I was concerned for my dad because he was on the rescue team for the Pentagon. And he was gone for 2 weeks. And we were out of state, and he was there, and we really didn't know what was going on. And we didn't know if he was okay, or if he'd been hurt. I'm very proud of my dad for what he did on 9/11, being on the first response crew to go there, and they didn't know what they were going into. They just went there and got the job done, and it's just amazing, I guess. You know, that my dad was part of that, and did that, and helped our country in its hour of need.
Many times people have asked me why I haven't talked about everything that I experienced at the Pentagon on September 11th. I guess the true reason why I have never, up until now, wanted to discuss any of what I experienced at the Pentagon is some of the experiences and the things that I actually saw when I was at the Pentagon. I don't think that people could understand or relate outside of the people that were actually there with me. There was some of the things that we had to do. I mean, when you're in the Army or in the service period, it doesn't have to be the Army. You're always directed at some point what you need to do. And when we were told to put on the NOMEC suits, when we were inside the Pentagon the one day, we were told to put on our gloves and get on our hands and knees and actually sift through rubble, I guess, and you're actually like moving stuff, but at the same time you don't know if you move one little item, what you're gonna find. And at one point they were giving us a description of what you might find, and they're talking about it, I guess, real nonchalantly, like, well, if you find this, then that might be a piece of skin, or you might find this and this and this, and not realizing that none of us have ever experienced anything like this or ever seen something like this. And next thing you know, we're down there and we're moving this rubble, and I mean, you're literally finding things, and you're like squishing them with your hand, wondering, did you just find a piece of someone's skin to their body? Or if you found like somebody's finger, or you found, maybe a wallet with someone's ID. That was hard. And another thing that we would have done that was hard for people to understand is like, we were in there moving rubble around, and I was with some of my buddies in my unit at the time, and we were going around the whole area, and we lifted up this huge piece of metal doing search, and someone, we knew it was somebody. You couldn't tell anything though, just from the fire and the heat. There was no body features, no facial features, no hair, no nothing. All you knew, it was somebody. And facing that and really trying to get the understanding, in your own mind that was someone's loved one. That was somebody's father, someone's, could have been somebody's mother, could have been any of those things. Made it pretty difficult, and some just decided not to say anything at all. And I did so for so many years. I just decided my way of dealing with it is I'm just not going to talk about it. I wouldn't watch the television shows, I wouldn't watch the specials. All I would do every year around the anniversary, not that I ever forgot 11th, and I would talk to the pastor or the chaplain on September 11th, no matter where I was. Whether it was at a school for the Army, if it was, I'm out here, doing my job, that day had to be set aside so that I could go and just talk about it. I guess one of those reasons would be I just didn't want to stir up a bunch of memories about what actually had happened. That everyone has their own way of dealing with everything. My way of dealing with it for so long is just to be quiet about it and not speak about it. And then, I guess another reason would be I don't think people really understood that we even had an Army unit there to start with. Understand that there was an Army unit there and accept that fact, and then I didn't want to get rejected by them saying, oh, you weren't there, you didn't do that, there's no Army Rescue Unit. And I knowing that I was there and that I did do what I did, it would have just upset me further. So I just decided not to say anything at all. I just kind of kept to myself. But after so long, I decided that it was time to say something about it and talk to people about it. Because I thought it was important that people understand what happened from a first account from the Army rescuers, so they could hear our point of view instead of, the little specials you hear on TV or see on TV. Not that that wasn't someone else's account, but no one's ever heard the guys that were in the unit from the Army's account. and I think it's important. I think it's important for the kids at the schools to know, because it's so easy for everyone to forget, especially them, because eventually our generation's going to be gone and their generation's going to live on, and it'll be easy for everyone to forget if people like myself and other guys in my unit and other rescuers across the nation don't talk about it and inform them of what actually did happen. And I think it's very important. Very important. So, I mean, I guess the most important thing that can come out of me of talking about all this is that, you know, the legacy and the importance of what happened on that day in New York and Pennsylvania and in Washington, D.C. is that we never forget, and that's only going to be displayed through people's actions and getting out there and actually talking about it. And it actually makes me feel better to tell other people about it. It takes a huge weight off one's shoulders. Makes you feel better on the inside.
This is my daughter, Kayla Wurgler, and I am going to ask her a few questions about what she knows about September 11th. Kayla, do you know what today is?
9/11.
What's the other name for 9/11?
Patriot Day.
That's right. What did you do at school today?
We watched a video about 9/11, how the planes crashed and the Pentagon and the Twin Towers, and how a lot of people got hurt that were in the planes and in the buildings.
Where were you on 9/11?
I wasn't born yet. I was in my mom's stomach.
So how do you know so much about 9/11?
From like school and all of the news stories.
So Kayla, do you think that Patriot Day there should be school?
No. Because I believe that on holidays or things that are very important, that we should not have to go to school.
Why not?
Because it's a very important day in life that affected almost every person that was born.
Where was your daddy on September 11th?
In the Pentagon.
What was he doing there?
He was a search and rescue person, which means that he would find people that were injured or hurt.
Have you ever watched the documentaries on 9/11?
Yeah, with my mom, because my dad can't watch him. He gets too depressed, because it reminds him of what happened.
How do you feel about your dad being an Army rescuer?
I feel that he's a hero, and that I love him very, very much, and I'm very, very proud of him.
So what do you got there?
This is Berry Boo, and she is a bear that my dad got me when he was in training for the Army, and then this is my daddy doll, which I got when I woke up from when I fell asleep on the couch and I found a box and I had my daddy doll in it.
How do you feel about those dolls?
they're really important to me because my dad got them for me.
And what do you use them for?
When he's not here, like when he went to Pennsylvania, because he got recruited there, and we used to sleep with them when he's not here. And the first night I got my daddy doll, I slept with it. And I give him big hugs.
All right, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Virginia traffic at its finest. Well, we're on our way to Fort Belvoir. That's where the engineer company, MBW, now 9/11th Engineer Company, is stationed out of. It's been about 8 years since I've been back here, so it's going to be kind of nice to be back in that area again. Going to be able to link up with some of my buddies that were in the company with me at the time we went to the Pentagon on September 11th. And get their point of view, so you know everyone can get a better understanding exactly what it was that our company did when the Pentagon was hit by the airplane. Hopefully everyone will get an eye-opening experience from the Army Rescue Engineer's point of view. BW Company, Engineer Company, now the 9/11 Engineer Company, was a technical rescue engineer company. What they specialize is in confined space, vertical collapse structure, and trench rescue. So if there was a condition or a circumstance that required our attention, that we could be deployed to that scene and assist in any way necessary, the same as any local fire department that had a rescue section to their fire department could. A lot of the individuals in the company are actually state certified in the state of Virginia as an EMT, which we give first response medical care to anybody that might be injured once we arrive on scene. The rubble out of the way and use our expertises on backhoes and on bobcats to help remove some of the rubble away from the area so that people could get into where they needed to get into. Both platoons also did a large part of the shoring operation that helped shore up the left part after it collapsed, so that no more of the building would collapse. They did a lot of shoring. And shoring is the stacking of different type of wood, or they call it cribbing as well, where you stack wood in such a way that it can support a specific amount of pounds.
The first way I heard about what happened on September 11th, I was actually at my house working on an evaluation for my platoon sergeant. And my wife called me at our home phone because she kept trying to reach my cell phone. Obviously, I wasn't answering. She asked if I'd heard what was going on, you know, with the Twin Towers being hit. And I said no, and I immediately hung up. I knew that my pager and my Motorola radio were in my car, so I quickly ran out to the car. Obviously had already had 3 pages. Knew that we were basically rallying up at the motor pool to get ready to go somewhere because I knew we would be put on alert. So the first way I found out was basically through my wife and not the actual company. Wow, the first thing I really remember seeing when we arrived at the Pentagon, of course, was, you know, the flames and the smoke coming out of the building. Seeing the amount of people standing by looking at the Pentagon, trying to figure out what happened. Of course, also looking at a lot of the other rescue organizations that were showing up. And from that point, really just determining where we were going to set up and where we were going to enter the building at first. The first feeling that I remember having is, I'm sure, which went through a lot of people's minds, was one, you can't believe it happened, you can't believe it's reality, and that we never thought this day would come. From that point, it's really just, you kind of go into almost like an automation mode of reacting, and everything that you've trained for at this point really just takes over. My first shift was probably so long that I don't even know how long it was. I know for the first 2 or 3 days we basically slept anywhere that we could find a place to sleep, and for our unit it typically was on top of vehicles or under vehicles. The hardest part, I think for any of us as being our job for the first day, was preparing yourself for the reality of seeing the various stages of death once entering the building. So anywhere from somebody dying from smoke inhalation to burned bodies to physically destroyed bodies. Being high ranked, the way we received orders from the chain of command, really you had I think anywhere from 7 to 9 national rescue teams, with the Army being the only service-related rescue team. So the way it was organized, everything was set up by, I guess, like a task force. And the task force cell really included individuals from each rescue organization. And from that point, priorities of work and sections of where we were working were pretty much given out as orders to each one. And then from there, my company commander would tell us, night shift, this is what you're working on, or day shift. And we really didn't need any kind of oversight. We knew our job. We've been trained for it. And, we went to our sections and we pretty much knew what needed to be done when we got there. We also had walkthroughs, typically once a day, to determine, the severity of certain areas of the building, what safety hazards were in those areas, be it jet fuel, biological concerns, still, smoldering debris that still may be in other areas. And during those walkthroughs, we also were pretty much decided amongst ourselves who would take what part. Communicating with our families was initially very hard. I believe it was probably maybe 3 days before we were allowed to contact our families. And I'm not sure who it was, but it was one of the phone companies that actually gave us free cell phones, so we could contact our families to let them know that we were okay and what was going on. The only time that we really found out what was going on in New York and Pennsylvania, I believe we were eventually given the gymnasium to sleep in at Fort McNair and the ability to watch the news. So probably the 4th or 5th day was the first time that a lot of us actually got to see the footage of the Twin Towers being hit, and then of course learning about Pennsylvania. So initially, no, up front, we, word of mouth or hearsay is really how we learned everything about what was going on. 9/11 has affected me personally, probably in a couple ways. One, really learning the value of life and how vulnerable we as Americans are. Second, really to see the outpouring of help from organizations that came to the Pentagon. A lot of places like Home Depot, Lowe's, donating all the lumber that they had. People donating all the heavy equipment. You had the Salvation Army, the Red Cross bringing, food and clothing for a lot of the things, to cover a lot of the things that we didn't have for those 10 or 11 days. As time has gone on, time pretty much heals everything. There are a lot of moments that you think back, especially when it comes down to the month of September. and then replaying some of the images that they show on TV, realizing that, you know, it could happen again at any moment. Just like in the past, we never thought it would happen, but it's definitely something that stays in your mind, that we're still vulnerable, and it could happen at any moment, at any place. 11. You know, it's a great time to remember the fallen. It's a great time to remember how unified we become. But a lot of the emotional scarring that happened in the past, it's for me personally, a lot of that's gone. And you know, it does kind of bring, I don't want to say a hatred, but more of an awareness of what goes on in the world today. And that, again, really what I do nowadays to remember 9/11, or when the time comes around, is participating in local events that go on, whether it's in town or up in Northern Virginia near the memorials. And typically for me, that's about it. You know, we all definitely remember, and usually around the time frame, a lot of us start contacting each other to kind of stay in touch and kind of bring back some of the stories of things that happened that day. The way I feel now that it's been 11 years since September 11th happened is we know there are different cultures or fanatics out there that don't agree with the way of our life. To me, that just really reinforces it, that we have a good life. We're a free country, and it just reinforces that, you know, we are the greatest nation in the world, and that there are a lot of people that envy that and probably feel threatened by it.
We flew down to Florida for vacation. We went down there for Disneyland, and I didn't want to get on a plane. That was the first time. I refused to get on a plane up until that point. This was like 2007.
Wow.
And I drove to Hilton Head. I drove all the way down there from Ohio. I just refused. We got down there and we heard that's when the shoe bomber thing, the guy with the bombs in the shoes.
Yeah.
After I had already flown down there, we're getting ready to fly back. I hear about that. I'm like, oh my
Round trip
goodness.
ticket. No choice.
I can't drive now. I'm screwed.
Yeah, I definitely pay attention to what's going on a plane.
The whole gate guard thing was funny too, because
That lasted, what, a year?
well, that first day when everything took place on September 11th, me and old Chris Champagne, old salt shaker, were on gate guard together, and that was the first day they implemented it. We were there at like 4 o'clock in the morning for our briefing, and then we were out there by 5:30, and that's how we found out about everything. People were coming through the gate crying and stuff.
Yeah.
And we're like, what? But it was just ironic that was the first day they actually really locked down the post with chicken IDs.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine if it wasn't that way, how their scramble after everything happened would have been? They would have been rushing to close all there. You know, there's so many entry points around the base. They would have been rushing to close them up and lock them. And luckily, every gate had somebody manned on it at the time.
Yeah. A lot of what I did was, you know, other than supervising the shoring up and everything, is it's the exact same thing y'all do. You know, walking through kind of combing the area, looking for body parts, and of course flagging the areas and calling the FBI in. So yeah, I mean, the Nomex suits, all that stuff. One of the biggest things that stands out in my memory is we were probably on day 6, day 7, and the medical guys looked at our filters, and they're like, y'all wearing the wrong filters, man. Y'all, that doesn't filter biological hazards caused by death. Yeah, so we had to change out and get the right filters. The day we started taking the ID photographs for the FBI, I mean, I still got it in there. It looks like I hadn't slept for days, but in actuality, I'd just woken up from a deep, deep sleep. I mean, eyes baggy. And
we all looked pretty rough. I used to have long hair back then. It was all everywhere. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah, I remember hiding how long your hair was.
That photo was kind of rough.
Yeah. You remember the search and rescue dogs? How smart they were.
They came later.
Yeah.
They did. They came later.
They were smart dogs. Just seeing them. Some of them burning their feet. And That's great.
We almost wish they would have came in earlier, because then they really would have been able to help us, but I forget where they came from. I don't even remember.
They came from all over. A lot of them were on call. Matter of fact, Fairfax County Search and Rescue gave me a vest for him as a search and rescue dog. Hey, buddy. You want to say hi to the camera? Say, I was around September 11th. I was there. So, buddy. You know, we pretty much did the same thing day to day. But the more seeing the various stages of, I don't know, death is really what, you know, you see from, hey, I know that, you know, if you knew them, you could say you can identify them right there. Seeing bodies in the hallway, underneath desks, hiding, to nothing but black ash, the shape of a body on the ground, to chunks of flesh. That's the, I think the hardest part's really seeing the person you could recognize, and not the other stages. But I don't know. There are times I still think about it. Sometimes I try to block it out. But
Do you remember like day 1 or 2 when they said there was another plane inbound?
yeah,
And everybody,
yeah, that's
everybody took off running for their life. That was real scary at the time because we didn't know what was going on. It was our understanding that all the planes were to be grounded at that time.
they brought out the what were they back then? The fighter jets started flying all through the area.
F-16s or something
I
like
think
that.
they were maybe an F-16.
That was scary.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time, man. Definitely interesting. Probably the toughest person I saw there was Master Major, you remember her name?
Strickland.
Strickland. But she lost her husband.
Her and Sergeant Brown.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about
Because
something.
he lost his loved one. All he wanted to do, he would have stayed in there 24 hours a day if they would have let him.
Yeah.
If they would have let him.
Yep. Did you ever have a time of breaking down?
No. I noticed a lot of guys that were there would consistently visit the chaplains and people that were on site.
Yeah.
But I don't remember a specific time where I really dealt with everything that was going on. I don't know about you. I just it was our job. Get up, go there, do what we have to do, and perform our duties, and then get out.
Now, I just remember the experienced guys from Fairfax County Search and Rescue that have gone international, talking about the Oklahoma City bombing and saying, your time will come. It might be a week from now, 2 years from now, 20 years from now, but you will break at one point. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I didn't think I would. And to be quite honest, man, I did, and I don't remember because I drank so much. And my wife asked me a question. A picture, something that come up on the news about the Twin Towers and them falling. And she asked me a question, and she said I just buried my face in my hands and started, you know, I just started bawling. She asked me the next day if I remember the night before. And I was like, no, I don't, because that's how much I'd had to drink. So I guess that was really the only time I broke.
Just recently started to deal with it myself.
I mean, I know a lot of other people that did break, but it's I'm kind of like you. That was our job. I think we trained so realistically with the rescue Randys that look like people. They weigh like people. I think that's my biggest takeaway is, you know, I guess people react differently by seeing death, and of course we're no different. So we recognize that you participated in a very historic event.
I specifically remember a moment that, you know, we were really scared when I was working inside the Pentagon. When I was inside the first ring, we got a call that there was possible plane inbound and in the sky. They did an immediate evacuation of everybody on site. And we had to run out of the building, through the building, into to the outside part of the building. They had us all sprint across the road that had been shut down right outside I think it was Interstate 376, if I'm not mistaken, sprint across that building and run to the other side of the road in case this plane was inbound. Now, luckily, it turned out to be a false alarm, obviously, but in the moment, all of us were extremely fearful that, all our, fears might come true with another plane being inbound while we were actually in the building. To tell us that it wasn't a plane is a load of crap.
Speaking of plane, remember it was day 3? FEMA almost got shot out of the sky.
Oh, when they said plane inbound and we had to run for our life?
We're inside doing our rescue operations, and all of a sudden the alarms are going off inside the Pentagon. So now they're getting everybody out, and we have to go across the main road over to the large grass area. And we had to collect over there, and the guns are open now. You have to understand, there's guns everywhere at this time. Day 2 and 3, this place is loaded in guns. And come to find out, it was FEMA that never got permission to enter restricted airspace and almost got shot out.
I remember that being a panic, though. We were in a panic. It was like, oh crap, this is going to be bad. We need to go, and we're running across the freaking 395 out there trying to get away. We're like, we had no clue what was going on. That was a tense moment.
Scariest moment that I remember was, I believe it was on the second day. We were taking a break in the Pentagon courtyard. McDonald's had literally donated food, and they had just came through and handed out, I don't even remember what it was, an Egg McMuffin or something. And I was sitting on a bench, and then all of a sudden you started hearing like 3 horn blasts, which means evacuate, there's a secondary collapse. And I'm like, me and the guy I was with, Eric Godby here, we're looking around, we're like, there's no secondary collapse. Why are we evacuating? And we saw all the firefighters literally just sliding down the ladders off the ladder trucks, and it was like, there's another plane coming, get the hell out. And we took off running through the tunnel, and it's still a little weird for me today, because 2 weeks ago I walked through that tunnel, and it brought back a flashback of that day of, we had SCBAs on, and we dropped everything, and we went out into the south parking lot pulling air guard. Not really sure what we was going to do with 9mm, but, we were pulling air guard in the south parking lot. And when they finally called the all clear, we kind of all looked at each other. We was like, what the hell was that? And I remember walking back inside of the tunnel, and it's not even really a tunnel, it's more of it's an access way going to the courtyard, but just seeing the amount of stuff that was strewn everywhere. I mean, SCBAs, helmets, gloves, Halligan bars, it was just stuff scattered everywhere. And
Fire chief, not sure if he was with Arlington or Maryland or whoever, came and grabbed Sergeant Early and I. Said, come with me. And took us down the catwalk. He wanted to get a better view of center court to see if the plane had punctured all the way through. We probably got about 3/4 of the way across the catwalk toward the A-ring, and the catwalk caught fire. And I was like the last guy. It was the chief, Sergeant Early, and I was the tail. And all of a sudden I saw the chief come running back. He's like, we got to go. And we were running. I remember my heart was beating. My SCBA at the time, it was fogging up. And I remember just pulling it off so I could breathe. And we were running. We were running across that catwalk because that thing was on fire. And we scooted, and we made it, and we scooted down the ladder. Not sure if it's called a shooting ladder. It was one of the ladder trucks that we were able to gain access with. And we made it down.
Some of the scariest moments of working at the Pentagon really were not knowing how stable the structure was. Really, a lot of our role was shoring up the structures in addition to recovering and trying to rescue personnel. We actually had to delay working in some areas before we could have a structural engineer come in, let us know that the building was not going to collapse on us. Other than that, the next scariest thing really is, as you're clearing through, trying to shore up the building, that's when you're really coming across the various stages of death and the bodies that we found in the Pentagon.
PLDC at Fort Knox. I never will forget. I had just been promoted to sergeant, and we had our little meeting with the Secret Service. And I looked at one of the Secret Service agents, and in our meeting, and I was like, "How hard would it be to hijack one of these planes and fly it into D.C.?" And I hope he remembers my name to this day, because I was told, Sergeant Snavely, that will never happen. I hope he remembers my name. First thing when we got to the Pentagon, I guess I was on the advance team. When I had first reported to the unit, they were under the impression that a helicopter had crashed into the Pentagon, and I told them about what had happened. And I had warned the guys that I was with that it was pretty bad, because you could see the smoke. You know, when I was coming down 395, you could see the smoke billowing up. When we got there the first night, the Pentagon was still on fire, and they wouldn't let us go in until the flames was put out. Kind of broke the cardinal rule. The hardest part of the first day was knowing someone that was actually killed. And Sergeant Brown, who was my platoon sergeant, his mother-in-law was at the Pentagon and in the part of the Pentagon where that was hit. And I had eaten dinner at his mother-in-law's house the Thanksgiving before. He looked at me, and he had just hung up the phone with his kids. And he was like, you know, I need to know where she's at. I need to know if she's okay. You know, nobody had reported her as, you know, still being alive, and nobody had reported her as a victim. He's like, I need to go in and find her office. And so we walked in. If you're looking at the crash site, would have been the wooden doors on the left-hand side behind the helipad, and Sergeant Brown and I walked in to the building when we weren't supposed to. We walked into the first aisleway, and that's where we saw the room numbers and how they went in order. And her room number was literally listed on the data plate, and it was to the right, and that was directly in line with the crash site. And we looked down and saw nothing but just, you know, tangled wires and tangled, you know, concrete, and there was probably 5-6 inches of water on the floor. And I looked at him and he looked at me, and we both knew that she was no longer with us. So, you know, we left, and that's kind of my first memory of being there, having a personal relationship with her, but actually knowing a face of someone that was killed. And I'd eaten dinner at this person's house. That was kind of the hardest thing on the first day, is knowing that Sergeant Brown's kids no longer had a grandmother. His wife's mom died in the attack. Being at the Pentagon was different for me. From all my other tours, from being overseas, there was something different about it. You know, I physically knew 2 people that died. I hate to be kind of the pessimistic person, but even when I was flying back from overseas, when I was in Eastern Europe, I would always size the person up on the plane. You know, where am I sitting? Where's the closest exit? I've always just been that type of person, but 9/11 was different because I knew somebody. You know, when I was deployed to Rwanda, when I was deployed to Macedonia, when I was deployed to Bosnia, you don't know those people, and it's less. It's not quite it's a personal experience, but you don't know that person on a personal level. And when you physically know somebody that was in the building and that was killed, it brings something different to it. Having been in Yugoslavia and saw what they did to each other, and then I would call it an unprovoked attack. It was a sneak attack. It was something cowardly. When we were cleaning up out of the lagoon in between the lagoon of body parts, yeah, that was the hardest thing for me. The hardest thing for me was right before I left, because I didn't come back with the unit. I left a few days before. It was when we were shoring up the outer ring. We had just started shoring and we were still going inside of where the plane hit. We found Sergeant Brown's mother-in-law's purse. We never found, to my knowledge, any part of her. But then that's when I found the what was left of the 4-year-old girl's leg that was on the plane. It was burned to the seat. And that's the part that really screws me up. You know, we had went into the inner rings and found, you know, there was a major and 2 lieutenant colonels that was on the 3rd floor. They were killed from concussion. They weren't burned up very bad. That was, you know, they were soldiers just like, you know, we were. You know, it's part of the job. It's the kids that was on the plane that really, really screws me up.
I just remember being in those suits on our hands and knees, and the FBI is like, well, if it's like this and it's squishy, and that's someone's skin, if you find any of that or this, and I just remember being on our hands and knees, just moving the stuff out of the way, not knowing what you're gonna find.
Yeah.
That messes with me. So.
That was, I remember going to Sergeant McCall, and I told him I'd found that, and we called the FBI over because they were starting to identify the victim's body parts. We called the FBI over, and I went to Sergeant McCall, and I was like, listen, I need to get out of here for a few minutes. I need to take a break. I need to go outside. I probably went outside. It was probably an hour. You know, I had to catch my breath. That one still haunts me.
The smell.
The smell.
The smell was horrible.
The smell of burnt flesh, jet fuel, and burnt flesh. And about day 4, day 5, when the stuff starts decomposing and it's setting in the water, and that's when they set up the hazmat station outside so that we could spray off when we came out. You know, so that way we didn't take any I guess you could call it biohazards to wherever, you know, our living quarters were. At the time it was the gym up at Fort McNair. I didn't sleep for 3 days. Because at the time I was still kind of the senior rescuer in the company. So I worked with, and I really didn't belong to anybody, so I worked for 3 consecutive days. I remember it distinctly because I went from Sergeant Sanchez's squad to Sergeant McCall's squad, back to Sergeant Sanchez's squad, and, you know, kind of progressed on. And the first time that I took to Fort McNair was the 3rd day into it, because I remember watching a little TV, because I was on terminal leave. I didn't have any bags, and people had kind of given me like a t-shirt to wear to bed and a pair of shorts to wear and stuff like that. And again, I was kind of a floater. I went anywhere from actually being a squad leader to a team leader. I was loaned out to Virginia Task Force 1 for a couple of missions that they did. We tried to start digging out the rubble from where we ended up putting up the 6x6 shoring. I was loaned to Virginia Task Force 1 to do that with the backhoe and with our wheel loader. So my responsibilities varied greatly. I didn't have just one thing that I was responsible for. It was just, it was a little weird being me, I guess. Kind of the thing that I do on 9/11 that's special to me is I try my best to take the day off from work. I have a hard time functioning because I'll look at the clock and then I'll revert back to what I was doing on that day, where I was on that day, and it's, you know, September the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, you know, those first days where we were at the Pentagon, and, you know, I'll always revert back to what I was doing, you know, flash back to this is what I was doing. I'll look at the clock, and we're back in the trucks. We were getting ready to go. We were at the airfield doing the A-22 bags, you know. So I try not to work. I don't function well. So It took a while for me to start talking about it. The first person I actually talked about it with, I remember the conversation. It was probably 4 years afterwards. Was my ex-father-in-law. He was a Vietnam veteran, and it was around the 4th anniversary. And I was having a very hard time dealing with it that year, and I'm not really sure why. Because I used to not talk about it. I used to not talk about a lot of the stuff that I'd seen or done. That was really the first time I started to talk about it openly. It's a bad day. 11 years later, we're not even 12 years later, we're not even 20 years later. You know, I can't believe that we've forgotten already what happened. I mean, I know for me it has, and I know for everybody that was in that unit, no one will ever forget that day. Nobody will ever forget where they were. You know, it just aggravates me. There's lunatics out there, and we can't keep them all out. I'd already done 3 combat tours before, and it had finally come to our shores. The difference in our, you know, from going from being deployed in a combat zone to being a rescue worker, when I first got stationed at Fort Belvoir, it was kind of a hard transition, because when I first got stationed at Fort Belvoir, I'd been out of Bosnia for 2 months. We came back from Bosnia in December of '96. I got stationed at Belvoir in February of '97, and it was somewhat hard. You know, transitioning from trained to go to war to now you're trained to save somebody. It became something that I really, really love to do. You know, that's why I do it for Fairfax County now. There's something about looking into someone's eyes when you've pulled them out of a building that unless you were there, they would have died in. And it's an emotion you can't really explain, other than it's a physical look. And my first one was in Haiti. First lady I pulled out, it sealed it for me. That's experiences that I had in Yugoslavia probably definitely led to why I wanted to come to Fort Belvoir and why I continue to do it. Having witnessed a lot of, you know, the genocide that was in Bosnia. You know, those are helpless people. And I think that's where the connection started with me. So I saw a lot of it firsthand. Now you physically have something that you can do about it. You can help. So that's where it started for me. I do watch some of the documentaries. More, I don't want to forget. I think it should be shown a lot more than just on September the 11th, September 10th, September 12th. Maybe that would make people remember a cowardly thing that, you know, had been done to us, and that was brought to us, you know, from cowards from overseas. The documentaries are somewhat different from me than probably they are than the other guys, because, you know, I had formed a relationship with a lot of the people in Fairfax County, and that's, you know, where I work for Fairfax County also on their search and rescue team. I see everybody from Fairfax County getting interviewed, but there's none of our guys that I was there with. There was nobody from the Army unit that responded. You know, none of our guys, except for, you know, Soldiers Magazine, Army Times. We weren't. It was like we never existed. I do. I think the federal government should shut down on September 11th. It's a great thing that it's not. It shouldn't be called a holiday, but Patriot Day. You know, the day of service. I think it should be like Pearl Harbor Day. You know, the greatest generation has their moment of infamy, well, we do too now. And I think that it should be a national recognized, like Memorial Day and Veterans Day.
I guess the only thing I got really left to share about it is I'm kind of really fed up with all these people who get on there and claim that this was a big conspiracy and that it wasn't a plane and it wasn't this and it wasn't that. Let me just say, coming from my point of view as someone that was actually there and on the ground, someone that actually picked up pieces of a plane and handed them to the FBI, that they're all full of crap and that it actually did happen and it's a tragic event that took place in our history and that it's just ridiculous for anyone to say anything else than that. Let's say what it is, what it is. It was a tragic event, period. And that we all pray that nothing like that ever happens again.
Well, one, because I've seen airplane parts, saw the nose of the plane where it stopped and the hole that it made. I crack up when I hear about the conspiracy theories because, you know,
we were there.
We were there. Saw them. And I've been fortunate enough, because of the position I'm in here, I've been able to witness some videotape of the actual, where the plane entered and the explosion. So, I mean, for all those conspiracy theories that are out there, keep projecting what you want. So only a few people truly know the truth. I think we're one of them.
Yeah, but it was all government conspiracy. We flew the plane in there on purpose. I mean, it's a bunch of crap. I mean, for anybody to say that, you know, at this point in the stage of our country, to still be in denial of what really happened, they're still haven't truly coped with what happened yet themselves. They're just ridiculous.
I can say I have a testimony that a plane hit it. Now, whether or not this was controlled by the government, I'm not in a position to say yay or nay. But I know that people died as a result of that.
I just find it ironic that they would hit the Department of Defense wing, where the military is located at, to test, or to test our nation and our country. I think that it was a strategic hit, through my own opinion, that they knew what they were doing and did it to strike us where it would hurt the most.
The initial reports that I heard is this plane was initially supposed to be inbound for the White House, but because of the approach and the visibility that was altered from the approach, they detoured, and they had a better line of sight from where the plane entered here at the Pentagon. That's one of the things I've heard. Now again, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, only God knows, really.
Right.
I wasn't there. I wasn't there getting a radio report. Oh, no. So
that's why they're exactly that. They're conspiracy theories. They're not fact.
Right.
They're not fact. And like he said, those of us that were on the ground actually picking up these parts and, pieces and tagging them and, helping get them to the FBI or whatnot. I mean, to tell us that it wasn't a plane is a load of crap.
A lot of weird questions from people that think it was a conspiracy, that, we bombed our own Pentagon and stuff like that. And honestly, until I got to the unit on 9/11, everybody thought a helicopter had crashed into it, because I actually saw the plane that came down.
I remember you telling us.
So I always, when I talk about it, because I do have a presentation that I have put together, I talk about where it all started with me, how I was in the Army, Army's Urban Search and Rescue Team, and how first disaster I deployed to was the Pentagon. And you get some people that still don't even believe that it happened. They think that it was that we did it to ourselves as a publicity stunt, or I'm not exactly sure of the words that I'm looking for right now, but that we put it on basically to go to war. I was there. I saw the plane come down. I know firsthand it happened. I cleared the wreckage. U.S. conspiracy theories, that's the word I was looking for. The conspiracy theorists can kiss my ass. Last year, I went home with my fiance, or I went to my fiance's home, and there was one of the guys that I met, and he was like, yeah, it's all a conspiracy. The government put it on. And I know Lindsay put, you know, it was something on Facebook, and she was like, why don't you ask Dewey about, you know, the conspiracy theorists? I'm sure he would put a squash to this right now. Why don't you call him and ask him? And I remember that. I can't believe that somebody would actually think that we would do that. You know, there's too much news coverage of it to say it was a conspiracy. It happened in the internet age. It happened in a time of technology. You know, it happened. Security camera. Well, I made deliveries to the Pentagon. That's the RDF camera. It's designed to look at the driver of the truck. It's not designed to see something flying at 550 miles an hour, skipping off the dirt, going into the side of the building. That's why there's 3 frames of it. And everybody's like, oh, they blurred it out, so that way you can't see what it is. You know, it was a very grainy picture. It's meant to see something from, well, that, and the thing of it is that's the only camera, because you had the Navy Exchange. He came up 395. Well, think about it. There's no security cameras that look up. You know, every security camera is focused on a door, or focused on a gas pump, or something like that. You know, the Naval Exchange was half a mile from the Pentagon, right there at the Cloverleaf on Columbia Pike. You know, that's why there's no video of it. Everything that's there is traffic cameras. He followed 395 to the Pentagon.
I've seen or heard of a couple of conspiracy theories, and while I was in Iraq in 2006, 2007, I had one of my British comrades asked if I'd heard of the conspiracy theory, and actually gave me the video, and it was a video that was produced by Americans, and you know, of course I entertained it. I still wanted to see it, to see what the theory was, and a lot of times it's easy to piece a story together when you go backwards in time. You know, it kind of made me angry that some people believed in a conspiracy theory that our nation's leadership would actually have the I guess the lack of compassion to create such an event just to really cause, or I guess justify going to war with somebody else. In the end, you really look at the conspiracy theory and you think, not America. It's not something we're about, and it's not something we would do just to start a war. So, although some of the conspiracy theory, you know, it piqued your curiosity, it's just, if you have any kind of rational mind, then you understand that America would not do something like that to go to war. It's just not possible. It's not in our blood.
You know, I remember when we left here the final day. Going up the freeway, we got like a hero's welcome. People were waving at us, all up the freeway. You know, I didn't know if I should feel good about that. I didn't know how to feel about that. I was more amazed. You know, we're 11 years ago, and we're right back to the September 10th mentality. You know, after 9/11, you saw the flags everywhere. We were united. You know, we were one country strong again. 11 years ago now, it's almost like that thought process is, you know, this can never happen. To me, and this is what I really try to stress to people, this will happen again. We just don't know when, and we don't know where. Industrial accidents. There's so many threats out there, and so that's what I try to do now. And it's based on the event on 9/11, where I really try to strive to these people. Don't ever forget, because when you put your guard down, you're done. Same concept when I was in Iraq. You know, stay alert, stay alive. Enjoy life. Live life to the fullest. But understand that at any moment, your life can change, just like 9/11. All the relief efforts, you know, if you had a want, you didn't really have a want. It was there. It was provided for you. You know, all the I'm trying to think what. Outback was it here? McDonald's. Was it McDonald's? Burger King?
Oh,
I'm trying to remember all those.
I know.
I was overwhelmed by
USO, Red Cross. People were giving clothes away, boots.
Yeah.
Remember pants, sweatshirts, because it was kind of chilly in the mornings. There, what else?
I still have my pair of boots that I got that they gave me because my first pair of boots after being here 2 days were absolutely saturated and I didn't have a backup pair. And I wanted something to wear back at the gym when we were there at night. And I was able to walk in and I said, my feet are soaked. I don't have another pair of shoes. And the lady goes, come here. She just grabbed me. She said, here. Pillows. You name it. We didn't need anything because it was given to us.
That happened
for
a
10
lot.
days.
A lot.
I can't express the amount of relief that we had here. But that's what was happening is people were showing up and eventually that in itself became a mission on how to contain it. And then eventually they had to start. Or they had the stands where you could get a massage.
Oh, yeah. I forgot
Remember?
about that.
You come out of the hole there for a while, you're on your little break, you could go up to the and just lay there, put your head down in the seat, and they give you a massage.
I forgot all about that.
I was down in Corridor 4, but that's the same concept that happened with all the quilts. We don't know where it comes from. They just showed up. And that's why Corridor 4, when you walk down there, they're lined with quilts.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
You know, you walk in from the center court to inner Corridor 4, and you got that nice big glass memorial of the pictures of that day. It's impressive. You know, the concept is never forget. And then inside the chapel, they have a nice little memorial there. My badge, my face is all black.
On your
you know, the new access badge that we had to go. It's on my my plaque now. But they pulled us out of the hole, and we had to go get our picture taken and get our new ID badge. Now I'm black.
Yeah.
I'm just covered in soot. And I remember going, it's a good thing I wasn't girly and I wanted to trim. And I'm like, all right, let's just do this. When we were trying to get back to Fort Belvoir, once our pagers went off, on the radio it sounded like a war was happening. It sounded multiple attacks all over the place because there were so many false reports. I remember Capitol building, there was a report of an explosion. There were so many false reports. And I'm not going to say the individual's name because I don't want to tear him apart. But there was an individual in the van with us that literally was freaking out. He, great guy, but I really, you know, you understand people in the event of an incident, of who you really want to be with in response. And this person started crying. He was really upset and didn't know what to do. This is the real deal, and he was, and, you know, it affects people different ways. And, but like I said, our pagers went off. And the whole purpose of our pager is what we train for. You know, we get alerted all the time to make sure our response time is accurate and accountability is there. But the primary purpose of that pager is if in the event of a real world incident, one objective. All we ever trained for was to rescue the primary. Nothing else. We weren't training to go assist others and, you know, rescuing people out of buildings, you know, except one person. And at the time it was top secret, so we weren't really allowed to say who the primary was. But the primary was the president. In the event something happened, our job was to go until we all dressed up and we had to go do the ceremony out there at Quantico. It was part of what we did at the time. So we were all in a van. Sergeant Coates at the time was driving. And en route up to Quantico, all our beepers went off. Now prior to this, we had seen on the news that a plane had hit the tower, the first plane. We weren't aware of the second plane. But after the first plane hit the tower, we already departed and headed up toward Quantico. And again, like I said, our beepers went off. And we were all wondering, all right, what the heck's going on here? Not calling another alert, are they? But so the NCOIC at that time called back and talked to First Sergeant Blue, wanting to know what the status was, and we're like, you guys need to get back here. Plane just hit the Pentagon, and we're being deployed. At that time, though, we weren't able to make it back. By that time, we were caught in the middle of traffic. We were stuck. We weren't moving. Freeways were bogged down, and we were. So we were trying to figure out what to do. We still needed to verify at the time that the ceremony itself had been canceled to do the event. So what the driver ended up doing was barreling off the side of the freeway down the road. And we made it up to Quantico, verified that it was canceled, and then we were already in that direction. And I think the mindset is what we're military, right? So it's always mission first. Mission changed, but we had to make sure that the initial mission was canceled or completed. We had a feeling it was going to be canceled, but we had to verify. And basically at that time, we were going to tell them, sorry, we're not going to be able to do it, but we at least had to show up. And when we showed up, it was canceled. So that was an easy, it was easy to deal with, and then we had to get back. We were already in that direction. There was no way that we could turn around anyhow, except up there. So, and then we had to get back. But we couldn't get back because all the traffic was bogged down, like I stated. So we got a hold of a motorcycle cop. I believe it was a car wash or something like that. It was really weird because it was almost as if he was clueless of what was going on at the time. So Sergeant Coates went ahead and he told him, this is what's going on. This is who we are. We're the technical rescue engineers out of Fort Belvoir, and we need to get back. We've been dispatched or deployed. And so he got the cop got on the radio, and he got us an escort. About 8 or 9 other motorcycle cops showed up, and we got an escort flying down Route 1 at it was pretty high speed. And they were pulling cars over left and right. It's pretty entertaining. We're like, all right, wow. It sounds like this might be the real deal of everything that we've always trained up to. We blew through the front gate, even though they were trying to stop us. We just blew right through. Later, I found out through one of the MPs that we ended up doing details with after this event that the Post Sergeant Major just happened to be out there, or one of the Sergeant Majors just happened to be out there, and he noticed who we were when we blew to the front gate, and he went, frickin' engineers. So that always floats our ego a little bit. But so at that time, we arrived at Fort Belvoir. During this process, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, Kimberly, we had only been dating like 2 weeks. She's wanting to know what's going on, and I'm trying to tell her, I can't tell you much because I don't know much, and I don't know when I'll talk to you next. And so she's freaking out because she has no idea what's going on. She was in her world experiencing her side of the event. But from there, we all lined up and we deployed down to the Pentagon. It was a slow deployment down there, very slow. They weren't sure if they had the proper height on the bridges. They had to lower some tires. So, again, slow commute, but we made it. We eventually arrived there on scene. And the first thing that we did, taking out on the scene, the story behind that, from what I was told, was upon entry of the building, I believe it was Arlington or Maryland Task Force was coming out, and they recognized us in the black suits. And they're like, wait a minute, it's too dang hot in here. You guys go in there, you got the suits. Look at your suits, well, it's just black, it's nothing special, it's not retardant. But at that phase, it was a phase of marking the entrance of the buildings, identifying bodies, marking them, moving on, see if we could find anything else, any sustained life at the time. We were still inside the golden hour. It was still a rescue operation. It wasn't recovery yet. We moved through, and then there really wasn't a lot of order. there was order, but there's a term for it. I can't remember what it is. Because you have to understand, during this is the first time that really anyone's ever been through any kind of an event like that. Not only on our level from Fort Belvoir, but surrounding levels. I mean, this is a mass event, you know. And I found this out through other conversations of other firefighters that I talked to. But the plan kind of switched a little bit. We ended up, from what I vaguely remember, we moved toward the left side of Corridor 3, and at that time there was many operations going on. There was the collection of airplane parts. I remember being out there in the grass with Sergeant Major Hall at the time of the Army. He was out there collecting parts along with us. I believe his name was Sergeant Major Hall, Sergeant Major of the Army. And also we had been deployed up on top of the roof because the main part of the fire had been contained, but the roof hadn't. And because it was on a shingle system, air was flowing underneath and was constantly feeding it. That's why, I don't know if you recall, what seemed like days, that roof was always smoking. So we had to go up on the roof, and we had to start punching holes through the roof into the ground. From there, it was still the continuation of punching holes through the roof. They were still trying to get logistics in, like wood and stuff, and I think they were still trying to come up with an established plan from that day. Later on, we were told we were broken up into teams, and we had to start entering the building because now we had to start looking for bodies. That halted because at that time they decided to start a shift rotation. So day one ended, I'm not sure exactly what time it was. It was dark, pretty late, when they finally did a rotation of shift, and we were sent over to Fort Myers. We were staying in the gym over there at Fort Myers, and because they had set up a schedule, a shift schedule. And during that time, that's where we were able to shower, get a little sleep. We were on our hands and knees for, it seemed like, about 10 to 12 hours. We were in a large area down below. Now I know it's the first floor, but the whole room was black. The whole area was black, just columns. Everything was black. And our job at the time was to retrieve something if we thought it was human remains. Basically, we had to grab it, pull it apart. If it returned to itself, we had to throw it into a red FBI bag. We had FBI all over our shoulder. They were taking pictures left and right. They were right over our shoulder. I mean, sometimes I wanted to yell, get away from them. So that's what we did. We were on our hands and knees doing this. If it was meat, we'd throw it in, inside of a red FBI bag. So like I said, this entire room is black. That's all you know is black, except for our Tyvek suits, which were starting to become black. And out of all this black, I found a red, yellow, and blue Winnie the Pooh diaper. And I raised it up, and I said, look at this, because it stood out to me. You know, the colors were still there. And it was right then that the lower half of an infant fell out. We had to call timeout. We had to go out to the corridor, remove our gear, get a little air, smoke a cigarette, and regroup. It took, one of the other events that I came across, I don't know if you recall the picture where the initial entry of the plane, and that big slab is at an angle. We were inside there. We were trying to get a body, because by this time, this is like day 2 or 3. So the golden hour had passed. It's no longer rescue, it's now a recovery operation. And we came across another body. And we had the old guard with us, because what we would do is after we would extract the body, we would put it in these blue body bags and then hand it off to the old guard, and they would take it off. They would take it away. Well, I'm holding half a corpse. It's basically unidentifiable. And the FBI guy was having a hard time trying to tag it. He didn't know where to tag it because everywhere he tagged it, it would crumble away. I said, well, I said, how about the femur? Because we were able to identify a part of the femur, and that was still solid enough that he could tag it. And I'm holding this body in my arms. And put it in this big, huge blue body bag, and off it went. Numerous accounts of that. That's, when we got into the meat of it. That's how our days were for about a good 3 or 4 days. And then eventually it shifted to shoring. But like we were clearing rooms. We found rooms where tables were turned over. Because we always, when we went to go clear a room, we always started from the right and worked our way around. It was a set process that we trained for, so we make sure we didn't miss anything. We go to a room and a table's tipped over. You can see 2 bodies that are melted together. But 20 feet away in the far corner on a stand, there's a glass of M&Ms, not even melted. We saw stuff like that all throughout. Just amazing things, All the heat that hit this room and the impact, and the heat from the jet fuel, and yet for some reason in that corner it wasn't touched. One of our identifiers that we always showed up to, and our squad saluted, was if you look at the entry of the building and how the concrete came down at an angle, the clean shear on the left, up on the 2nd or 3rd floor, there's a stand with a Marine dictionary. Not even touched. It's right on the edge. Still white. The flag's right next to it. Why didn't it burn? Why didn't it go? Why didn't it fall off? We saluted it every morning. Why not? So.
I remember that morning of September 11, 2001. We had a funeral detail in Quantico, and we were in the bus, in the van, getting ready to go to Quantico, when we heard on the radio about the plane that hit the tower in New York. And I remember that Sergeant Van too, and we looked at each other and we said, it's probably an accident. And it was 15 minutes later when the other plane hit the other tower, we said, no, this is terrorists. And then our first sergeant told us to continue with the mission, so we went down to Quantico. And then when they finally found out that a plane hit the Pentagon, we were called back. So we all came back. He told us to get escort from the police. And I remember we went to Prince William Police Department, and they escorted us to the base. And when we got there, everybody was coming out of the base crying. I mean, it's a day that I'm never gonna forget, because see people crying and we knew that we were under attack and there was terrorism. I mean, it's a day that is always gonna be in my mind. I'm never gonna forget that day. It was a sad day. It was an emotional day. I mean, we were looking everywhere like, what's going on here? What's going on? Are we going to war? Are we going to die? What's really going on here? Leaving the cemetery, as I did, I feel really bad. I feel really bad. And especially for me, I had my family at the time. I was concerned about my family security. I was like, what's going to happen after this? Are they going to attack us? Is my family going to be all right? There's a lot of things that go through your mind in a situation like that. Upon the arrival on the Pentagon, I saw a lot of smoke. And you could have smelled the gasoline and the smoke all the way down to Reagan National Airport. There was a lot of smoke. That's all I saw, a lot of smoke. What I was going to see. what I was going to encounter once I go in the Pentagon. I was thinking about dead bodies, burned people. That's what I was thinking. I really went through my mind. My first shift, I don't even remember. It was a long time. My responsibility was look for survivors and stabilize the building. Some shoring and basically stabilize the building. Make sure everything was safe so you go in the Pentagon. Look for survivors. That was our main mission. The hardest part about that job was to find dead people, body parts. That was the hardest part. It's still bothering me a little bit. Sometimes I think about it. Sometimes I try not to think about it. Especially right now that I work right next to where I was 11 years. Every time I look that way to the Pentagon, everything. I try not to think about it. I wasn't able to communicate with my family until like probably a week later. When I finally could have talked to my wife a week later. We didn't know at the time. I didn't even know. I knew about the Twin Towers because it happened early in the morning, but we didn't know about the other plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. It bothered me. Yeah, it bothered me. Our unit did a lot of work on that plane. A lot. And it bothered me because everybody's being recognized, and I always ask myself, where's NDW engine? Why nobody spoke about NDW engineer? It bothers me. It bothers me, and I feel like I was just a number in it. I was a body that was there helping. And that was the only Army search and rescue unit in the Pentagon. And on my personal point of view, and I know we did more work than anybody in there. The Army, you gotta work. You gotta do your mission, you gotta work. So, yes, it bothers me that we haven't been recognized. That what we should be recognized. I hope that someday somebody think about NDW and say, oh, those guys are heroes. They are heroes too. And recognize them. I watch the news. I watch the news. Every 9/11, I watch the news, and I watch every memorial that they have. I watch them. Because I think every time I see them stretcher, I say, I was there. I'm one of the heroes. I'm part of the history of this country. They don't affect me at all. I just, in my heart and in my mind, I know I'm a hero. I know I was there and did my job. And same as all my fellow soldiers that we were there at that time, we were proud to be there and do our job. So I think like a hero. I don't think like a victim. It doesn't affect me at all. And the day of the anniversary, I don't do nothing special. I just think about that day. I got every moment, ever since we got home, the time we got to be Pentagon, every it wasn't fair. A lot of innocent people died just because of the invasion of power. A lot of innocent people died that didn't have to die. This right here is a memorial for all the people that died on 9/11 on the Pentagon. Basically, underneath this memorial, there's remains of the people that died on the Pentagon. The ones that they could identify. So it's a tribute to all those people that gave their lives for our freedom in a coward attack. The diamond means people that were American Airlines plane. And the star is people that didn't get identified. The star is body's not identified, and the diamonds are the passenger of the American Airlines.
And then, like I said, my office is right across the 9/11 memorial. And I have to show you when we go out there, but it steps up. And it's purposely stepped up the wall because it's based on age, from the youngest to the oldest. And each person has their own airplane wing. Now it's after the memorial. Now,
98.
what's your name, Sergeant Major? Larry Strickland. Yeah, Larry Strickland. Her husband who died here that day. He's up.
She was Post Sergeant Major at Fort Belvoir.
She was actually ordered, I believe, from what I heard, at day 3 she was ordered to leave because she wouldn't leave until she found out something about her husband. And finally, she was ordered to leave. They had to escort her away because, obviously, emotionally, running rampant.
There's actually a wing dedicated to Sergeant Major Strickland that passed here at Fort Jackson in the NCO Academy.
Okay.
That's the single grave of the 3-year-old that I found the day before.
While being at the Pentagon Memorial, I had a rush of emotions come over me. Here I am, looking at and sitting on these plain, wing-shaped memorials, wondering, was this one of the people I found or helped identify? At the same time, I had the sheer magnitude of the memorial and what it stood for was overwhelming in itself. There was someone's child there who was still a baby, an innocent child, one that will never have the opportunity to grow up because of the events on September 11th. I think one thing that is important is to say that how beautifully built this memorial was, and that is a very peaceful place for people to come and mourn and for future generations to reflect on.
our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
If I could only wake up and know this was a dream, everything in America would still be the same. But I know deep in my heart this is reality. But they can't take our freedom, can't take it away. We love America, from sea to shining sea. We love America.